What's going on? Boys, the kind of tired sleep won't fix, you know it, order development. We have quite a few topics to cover today, and we are probably not going to get to all of them. But starting off, I'm beginning to think a set of beliefs and practices individuals so inclined can use to turn themselves into something instead of traditional organizational structure makes more sense. Now, we have a scholarly spiritual arm. None of it written down yet, but if you're here, you probably get it. But for a long while now, I've been considering a physical arm, physical tenets or aspirations. I mean, even a little bit of lifting raises your consciousness by a few degrees. But what happens when you get deeper into the physical side? While I started lifting again and got some of my strength back, and natural strength does come back unless you starve yourself and lose 35 pounds, at which point it's going to come back a lot slower, but it will come back. I wanted a little bit more. Something more than just a hobby. Practical strength. Practical conditioning. I started doing steep climbing, followed by adding a weighted plate carrier. The end goal being the ability to carry at least 135 pounds about a mile uphill within a decent time frame that I haven't worked out yet. But with the conditioning not to need to stop very often. And progress on the weight and not needing to stop fronts is coming very slowly. But regarding conditioning, although I'm stopping just as much, I'm recovering unbelievably quicker. And when you take the weights off, you'll be amazed at how cooking you can get through terrain that would have previously whooped your ass. And I'm trying to do it in the evenings, for the most part fasted. I'm working to cultivate the ability to do things physically and mentally demanding when your body really doesn't want to. The end goal being the ability to do physically and mentally demanding things without caring whether or not you want to, because it doesn't matter, you're used to it. I'm also getting back into practicing some other things. Again, fasted, but not physically busted yet. Although I'd like to get to the point I can figure out how to make that happen. And you might be wondering what the point of this is. The ability to save someone or save yourself, sure. Not letting physical shortcomings stop you anymore. But if you're talking about resisting anything, it doesn't matter. You can carry 1,000 pounds to the end of the earth. Uncle Sam and his child predator goblins are still going to put you down. And you are absolutely right. That's another thing I've been thinking about. It doesn't matter if they get you in the end. All that matters is you did right by your flesh, your bone, and your deity. You chose not to ignore every facet of your being and let evil people have their way with you. So maybe consider slowly but surely developing the physical skills required by those spiritual directives. And on that note, before we move on about kit, you don't need to be a nasally, tactical, balding, ball cap, beard guy to put together something subtle and functional. Again, if it comes to that, or when it comes to that, the world is ending, of course. We're in hell. You can come up with more solutions and give yourself more advantages than you think. Listen to your gut. Don't let those demons demoralize you. Now, you might have picked up on some keywords earlier: flesh and bone. Bone comes out of fixating on the lich white skeleton image. Bone is noble and enduring. Bone isn't concerned with fleshly matters. Bone is concerned with standing for whatever it's meant to stand for in your life, even beyond death, or in spite of death. Even if no good deed goes unpunished, you still need to do the good deed. Connecting with your skeleton means doing that good deed immediately, without hesitation and without grumbling, in spite of those certain consequences. Bone is turning the other cheek and meaning it. Bone is forgiving and moving on, even if only for your own sake. Bone is donating to a local library because preserving knowledge is important whether or not you are alive. The lich image is still attached to bone. It's an enduring, ennobling, and stern but warm power. Bone is enduring righteousness without hesitation. Flesh came second, and flesh is a bit different. It's another form of righteousness, working in concert with bone. Some overlap, but for the most part, its own thing. I'm still working on flesh because I noticed it recently, but, no pun intended, it feels like a fully fleshed out thing. There's a guy in my professional vicinity I thought I was becoming close with, who turned on me and spearheaded an operation against me when he didn't need to, and I tried to make that clear to him that he didn't need to, and he did it anyway. And then I later found out he spearheaded an operation trying to prevent me from working ever again in this sector. And I'm not going to get too deep into it here, but after some reflection, I think he's the first actual psychopath I've met. And I mean, maybe you meet them and don't realize it, but this is the first instance. I mean, I've met or dealt with bad people before, but this is the first time I've encountered someone I looked at and realized this person is not a person. Anyway, cognitively, I'm pretty sure he's an ENTJ. He's tall, he does the ENTJ roundabout threatening thing by threatening you by telling you how dangerous they are instead of by threatening you directly. And I feel very intimidated by him, or by what he represents. The vibes I get off him are, if it comes to a serious conflict, it's a that's it conflict. And my area is weird. Where I used to live, a handful of people would get shot every night. That's just how it was. Whereas out here, you might get just a few killings per year, but nothing ever gets done about them. As in a somewhat recent incident, someone gets driven off the road between bumfuck and nowhere and gets mag dumped, and nothing gets done about it. And considering how reptilianly evil people around here are, having serious problems with someone is scary. And I didn't run across him for some time, but out of nowhere we crossed paths, and I was overtaken by fear. And because that fear feels pathetic and humiliating, my instinct was to try to suppress it and put on a tough face, which doesn't work and sets you back on a few levels because nobody's buying it, and you're dumping so much effort into trying to appear a way you clearly aren't. When something pops off, you aren't ready. And I had this epiphany. In the same way, it felt like my bones were speaking to me through the symbol of a lich. I got this image of a Leshen or a Wendigo serving to help me communicate with my flesh. And when you listen to your flesh, I think you become a more potent human. The first line was acknowledging the fact faking strength or disinterest isn't going to do anything. If anything, it's going to hurt you. The second line was acknowledge what you're feeling. Acknowledge you are afraid. Let yourself feel your fear and pay attention to how your flesh responds to your accepting this emotion. In this instance, a high level of focus and prepared aggression. And the interesting thing about listening to your components is not only do they make you stronger, but also they tell you things you don't understand. They make you aware of aspects of the world and, more importantly, of yourself you were not previously aware of. For instance, the third line. Now you are afraid and have accepted you are afraid. What do you want to do if he verbally threatens you? I want to cower and cry. What do you want to do if he physically attacks you? I want to eat him. Okay, now what happens when other people come to hurt you because you defended yourself? I want to eat them too. Now, that is somewhere between that makes no sense and that makes perfect sense. Flesh is your fleshy, mortal aspect. Flesh is your fear. Flesh is your viciousness. Flesh is your tenderness. Felt tenderness, I mean. Flesh is every neuron of your biology before you die. And what's interesting to me is flesh, the prime directive of flesh, is not survival and propagation. Flesh is unleashing and reveling in your mortality. Flesh is, on the one hand, wanting to ball up and cry and be afraid, feel afraid, like an infant. And on the other hand, becoming the animal you are when threatened. Or in any circumstance, your true animalism is necessary. For instance, one overlapping aspect between bone and flesh is victory. Bone might approach victory with the cold acknowledgement of what was won and the plan of how it will be used. Flesh might approach victory by American history Xing somebody. And of course, we go through these schemas like chips, but I think there's a lot to learn from these two aspects about yourself and about the world, using the image of a lich and the image of a leshen or a wendigo, bone and flesh, the union of which being the autonomous mind and spirit, you. Not a third part, the marriage of the two. And understanding this is important, or understanding these constituent parts is important, because even if you are up in a tower overlooking everything, you still can't see through a forest's canopy. Bone and flesh. Anthropomorphize aspects of yourself and let them surprise you. Now we are getting into the less focused but still some interesting things section. In the failed artist's bunker, there was a selection of books on magic and the occult, and they were annotated by him. And you can actually buy these annotated versions for yourself if you are of the mind, if bad guy engineering can take us into space, then maybe bad guy magic can take us somewhere else. I haven't read much of that meat stuff yet because I am trying to force myself through the unbiased academic account of this strain of events during that time period. But one annotation jumped out at me I thought is important. It goes something like, the man with the most active imagination harnesses the most power. It's not the smartest man harnesses the most power, it's not the strongest man harnesses the most power, it's not the wealthiest man harnesses the most power. It is the most imaginative man who harnesses the most power. And woman. We're inclusive on this channel. And because people keep asking and I keep explaining, it bears repeating, when I say boys, if you're here, you are one of the boys. And boys here does not mean boyishness, it means a general sense of alienation or derealization, whatever you want to call it. You're here, so you probably already know what I mean. But again, bears repeating, people don't stop asking. The point of bringing up the imaginative thing is I think that is the case. The more you let yourself think and take measures to engage aspects of your thinking you would otherwise suppress, the more powerful you become. Reality starts subtly bending itself around you. That doesn't mean you're in control, but you are getting in with entities who might have more control than your mortal brethren do. Or, if not that, then you become a well into which energy flows. Your mind is a powerful transmitting tool. The more you hone it, the better off you'll be. That's where the lightning bolts came from. Recently, I got fixated on the PSYOP patch, the one with the ghost with the lightning bolts, or the horror waves, if you interpret them that way. I think if a group of people, or even an individual, set out to do something supernatural, hyper-focused intentions and practices, they are bound to force something to happen, even if they take no action physically. Playing with your mind will make you more powerful. You don't even need to get anywhere necessarily, whatever that means. All you need to do is experiment with your mind in ways you otherwise wouldn't. You're going to come out of it sharper. And the other reason I think the lightning bolts or the waves or the signals are appropriate is I can't exactly put into words how or why, but I feel I've jumped up another level with no regimented, ritualized nothing. Just fucking around mentally and physically until something clicked. You can do it too. I'll bet you have the capacity to find your own way into something more. And the more I think about it, what is the end game of all this? Preparing individuals for their departure from whatever shithole reality this is. Maybe every reality is a shithole, but we aren't there yet. Preparing the righteous to carry out righteousness during the end times. Slowly but surely, it's coming together. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. Disco Elysium is so good. It's telling. Remember we were talking about last time about Lovecraft potentially tapping into secret knowledge he wasn't supposed to? I think Disco Elysium came into something similar. After life, death. After death, life again. Like if you enjoyed, because it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes. And comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. But thanks again for watching, everybody. Really, we have a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun, in fact, you can throw it in a park for a dog to catch. Because throwing things is fun. And that's so much fun we have on this channel. And I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.